Welcome Takeshi Miyamori, please. So, well, it's a great pleasure and great honor to welcome you at our Séminaire. Thank you for accepting our invitation. So, Takeshi Miyamori leads the OECD work on decarbonizing buildings in cities and regions. And you have a large, very large experience, over 18 years, first with the Japanese government, as an environmental policymaker for housing and building, and also including 3 years in the Prime Minister's office developing policies such as COVID-19 measures. And you are holding 2 master's degrees in engineering and public economics. So today you're going to talk about the challenges and strategy in decarbonizing buildings in Japan towards a net zero carbon future. Please take over.
Bonjour, merci de m'avoir invité. Mesdames et messieurs, merci d'être venus. Je m'appelle Takeshi Miyamori et je suis analyste senior de politique publique à l'OCDE. So I will switch to English. So thank you. So before we start, please allow me to tell you more about myself and what we do in OECD. So I'm a policymaker on building and housing policies. I started to work for the OECD last April, and I'm leading the project called Decarbonizing Buildings in cities and regions. So we believe the cities are the key drivers for this topic. So last March, we launched this report, and so we made a checklist for both national government and sub-national government for the public actions. So if you are interested in global examples, please check our website. This year, we are conducting a survey in Netherlands. But today, I want to talk about Japan. So I talk about the national policy on Japanese decarbonizing buildings policies today. So why Japan? It's not only because I'm Japanese. We believe that we cannot miss the Asian growing market when we talk about economy and also decarbonizing buildings and environment and climate change. So by the end of today's presentation, hopefully, we will know better about how the local climates and people's lifestyle and the policies affect each other. So this is electricity demand for ASEAN, so Southeast Asian countries, residential end uses. So this is data from IEA. As you can see, the blue-colored one in above. So as you can see, the cooling demand will rapidly increase in next decades, not heating. So this reminds us that climate and energy demand differs by location. And we also can see the heat wave in European cities these years. In Netherlands, air-to-air heat pumps used as air conditioning is growing rapidly too. And also we have a Paris in 50 degrees project now. So I will start to talk about Japan. So this is a quiz. So let me ask you a question. So this is an international comparison on household energy consumption. So this is the United States at the first one. So red in heating, blue in air conditioning, green in hot water supply, and else. So we have 4 countries here: France, Japan, UK, and Germany. So can you guess which one is France and Japan? Maybe. So you can see the 3 countries are similar, and the last one is quite different, right? So I'll give you a hint. So this map, you can see the northernmost part of Japan. Hokkaido's latitude is aligned with southern France. And Okinawa, it's close to Africa. So this is the answer. So European countries are similar. So most of them use heating a lot. But Japan, you can see the total amount of consumption is not large as European countries. And you can see the difference between heating and hot water supply. So Japan's consumption of heating is less than 1/4 of that of France, red one. And so you can see the difference between hot water. If you see the hot water, green one, Japan has double of that of France. So while people in other countries heat their homes continuously, most Japanese living style is intermittent heating and cooling. So we only heat and cool rooms which we stay in, and only when we stay at home. So we switch off the air conditioning when we leave the room. So we use the air-to-air heat pump in winter and also in summer for heating and cooling, both ways. So on the other hand, hot water supply, we have a lot because we love baths. We take a bath every day. So by the way, whenever you visit Japan, so I recommend you to stay in a nice hot spring inn. So we have a lot of nice hot spring inn in Japan. But to be careful, those old hotels are cold since we have poor insulation in those old buildings. Now this graph shows the difference between the regions of Japan. So the top one is Hokkaido, which is the northern part of Japan. It's similar to Paris. So we have more than half of our consumption in heating. So they use oil heating, which now we recommend them to switch to use air-to-air heat pumps. In the southernmost part of Japan, Okinawa, so you can see they don't have heating. They have no orange one, but have the blue one, so which is cooling. They have a tropical weather. And in Kanto, Tokyo, so we have heating in winter and cooling in summer. So, but you can notice that the heating, the orange one is bigger than the blue one, cooling. Can you guess why? So let's imagine. So when it's 33 degrees in summer, which nowadays it's going to 35 or 36, 37, but usually, so in Tokyo, it's 33 at the highest in summer. So we only reduce 5 degrees to 33 to 28. So only 5 degrees to reduce. But in winter, with 5 degrees, so you need to increase temperature by 15 degrees, so to reach a comfortable temperature of 20 degrees. So that's why we need a lot of energy in winter for heating. And you can also find out that we use a lot of hot water in every region, and we don't have such a difference between regions for hot water. So as a result, we have different energy efficiency standards in Japan. So we divided it to 8 regions, 4 standards. We request thick insulation in Hokkaido at the northern part, but we don't request any insulation in Okinawa, tropical weather. Instead, we request design, passive design, such as sun shading in Okinawa. So we welcome sunshine in Hokkaido to reduce the demand of heating, whereas we try to cut sunshine in Okinawa to reduce the demand for cooling. So passive design is totally different from regions. So you know what happened? So this is a result of poor insulation in southern part of Japan. So in some part of Japan, so we have an indoor temperature in winter is below 14 degrees. So World Health Organization, WHO, recommends above 18 degrees for our health, but we have a lot of regions below 18 degrees in winter. So I have a friend in Hokkaido, the northern part, with insulated homes. He sometimes eats ice cream at home, wearing t-shirt in winter. But we don't do like that in other regions in Japan. So that's because they have insulation. So this is not only the result of the standards, since it's not mandatory for housing in Japan yet. In the past, few decades ago, in 60s and 70s, traditionally, Japanese houses were designed for summer, avoiding the high humidity, not designed for the winter. Now we want to change it. So they have no insulation and no airtightness, which were built in old days. So we know that we need to improve this situation. And also, insulation is important, not only for climate change, nor energy saving, but also for our health. So now we have talked about household sector. So let's compare with other trends, other sectors in Japan. So this is a trend in final energy consumption in Japan. So the total proportion of commercial sector and household sector was 25% in 1990, but now it's above 30%. And when you see the growth rate from 1990 to 2019, the commercial and household sectors are the only sector which are increasing. So we believe there is a huge potential for reduction in building sectors in Japan. So, what we have for our goals. So we Japan submitted GHG emission reduction goals as NDC nationally determined contribution last October. So minus 46% by 2030 and net zero by 2050. But we all know these goals are not enough if we want to achieve the minus 1.5 degrees as IPCC reported. So we need more effort. So regarding carbon neutral goals by 2050, 785 local government units already committed carbon neutrality by 2050, which is 40% of the total local governments of 1,800. So this is a good sign since local government is a key driver for the implementation on decarbonizing buildings. So we need to promote much more cities and regions to commit carbon neutral by 2050. So let's go to the next, the challenges. So to achieve the national goals, we need to promote net zero energy house for the building sector. So net zero energy house in Japan is defined as a house in which energy consumption per year is 0 or less on a net basis. So it requires a high envelope insulation, high efficiency of equipment, and also the energy creation. So we have two types of regulation standards in Japan. One is building envelope insulation standard. The other is primary energy consumption standard. So we evaluate the insulation for demand, heat demand, and also we evaluate the efficiency of equipment and also how much they create energy by solar panel. So this chart shows a building envelope insulation standard. So we made this chart for Japan, but this is a little bit old. So please note that this is not the latest one for the other countries. So this is what we want to compare with the other countries, but in the few years ago. So the vertical line shows a heat transmission coefficient, which is smaller, the better. The horizontal line shows a heating degree day, the colder to the light. As you can see, Japan's current standards in red is quite similar to other countries in cold areas. But they had a big gap in warm areas, the left side, including Tokyo. Now, Japanese government decided to strengthen the standards to the pink line by 2030. So this is a relationship between energy consumption and the number of buildings starts. The number of buildings subject to the obligation of compliance accounts only 3%, which is orange one. But their energy consumption accounts for 50% of the total energy consumption. This is why we first targeted the huge non-residential buildings to make it mandate to meet the standards for newly built. So we have a lot of detached small house in Japan, but their each consumption is not big. But if you sum up, it will be big. So I will talk about my experience. So 7 years ago, when I was in charge of making a new law to mandate non-residential buildings, there was a huge resistance by architects and small construction company to make it mandatory to residential buildings. So we could only target the non-residential buildings. But now the situation has totally changed, and it became crucial to make all newly built constructed buildings mandatory to achieve our goals by 2030. So we decided to expand the target to all the buildings, including detached houses, to comply with the standards. So even though we have a big proportion of newly constructed buildings in Japan, we need to think about existing stocks. So we have a lot, 60 million units in Japan for housing units. And there are 9 million non-earthquake resistant housing units, which is in red. So for these old buildings, without earthquake resistant, it's quite difficult to renovate. So the realistic way is rebuilding. So in order to improve seismic performance, rebuilding is a realistic way. But for the other buildings constructed in 80s and 90s, we need to renovate for insulation. So how to tackle with these challenges? I would like to share its strategies and measures. So this is a basic energy plan and the strategy. So we have two roadmaps toward 2030 and 2050. For the building stock, existing buildings, by 2050, zero energy building standard levels on average for building stock. And also, PVs, solar panel, to be installed in all buildings where it is reasonable. For the newly built, by 2025, the standard will be mandated for homes and small buildings. And by 2030, zero energy building standard for newly built and PVs to be installed in 60% of newly built detached houses. We also have a target for the usage of timber. So to expand the use of timber as a carbon sink, we will promote efforts to transition to building based on wooden and wood-based construction. So most of the detached house in Japan is wooden, but for the non-residential buildings, it's not wooden, but we try to make it wooden. So we have a plan for global warming countermeasures here. So this is the left side. You can see the reduction target in buildings. So we have non-residential target, residential target, and also the newly built target and renovation target. So since we have many reconstruction, newly built in Japan, we have ambitious reduction target for newly built. But what I think the biggest challenge is the renovation in existing buildings. So you can see the orange one. This target requests 250,000 energy efficient renovation each year, which is quite ambitious for us. So now I would like to share the measures. So this is a revision to the Building Energy Efficiency Act, which was passed this year in the Parliament. So first one is obligation for owners of newly built. So we are doing things step by step. We spent years for awareness raising and training local competitors for insulation. And for the small buildings, we didn't have any obligation to meet the standards, but we had a unique one, which is obligation for architects to explain about the performance to their clients. That's the obligation to the architect. So I have a data that shows 24% of clients who are not interested at first about energy efficiency change their mind to make their homes energy efficient. This happened because they were explained about their performance by architects, because it was obligation for the architects to explain the performance of buildings. So as we did step by step, so finally this year, we decided to expand the target buildings to all the buildings for the obligation to meet the standards. And the second pillar is obligation for sales and lease suppliers to give the information of energy efficiency to consumers. So we have these labeling systems, but it's not obligation to the sales people or lease people yet, but we will make this obligation. The third pillar is renewable energy. So we created a new program this year. So local governments can designate the promoting district for PVs or etc. for the renewable energy. So in these districts, architects need to explain the effect of introducing renewable energy, such as rooftop solar panels. And also in those areas, you can get the rationalization of form regulation. So building coverage ratio increases when roofed with solar panels. So I have talked about recent measures so far. So what's next? It's a life cycle carbon minus housing. So this LCCM housing, we call it in Japan, achieves negative CO2 emissions throughout the entire life cycle, from construction to demolition and reuse. But in Japan, we have not developed this as a standard or the regulation yet, like the European countries. So we need to develop these measures. So to achieve life cycle carbon minus housing, so passive design is also the key. So this is a demonstration building in Build Research Institute of Japan. The concept is changing their clothes by seasons. In winter, we welcome direct gain of sunshine. On the other hand, in summer, they block it. So this is the way we do in Japan. So I think it's a time to summarize it. So we have 4 pillars for top up and bottom up for the performance of the buildings. The first one is regulative measures to bottom up. So mandatory compliance for all the constructed buildings by 2025. And gradual upgrade of standards to zero energy building by 2030. The second pillar is informative measures. So energy performance certificate will be obligation for sales and rent by 2024. So regarding renovation, public awareness is a key, and we believe that evidence of the co-benefit of decarbonizing building is important. So we have an insulation health nationwide survey program. So you can see the graph on the right side. So the researchers have developed that energy efficiency renovation will reduce the blood pressure in the morning. So we subsidize this project. I mean, the national government subsidized this project. And we are now collecting these evidence to share with the public to promote renovation of existing homes. And the third pillar is financial incentive measures. So we have grant, tax relief, low interest loan for the zero energy building or for the renovation. And promoting not only full renovation, but also partial renovation, we promote these things today, because if you totally full renovate, it will have a great initial cost, and people, especially the elderly people, hesitate to do that. So we ask them, only living and bedroom is okay for renovation. If you don't use your homes upstairs, then you can only insulate the first floor, like that. So we promote these days for the partial renovation. We didn't do that in the past, but we try to expand the renovation these days. And the last one is a capacity building. So we promote small housing constructors, carpenters, to create local housing teams. So we subsidize, support these team construction, and we subsidize the system development to promote zero energy building by these local teams. So housing contractor competitors work together with low wood suppliers, lumber companies, building material distributors, and wooden precast companies and architect offices. So we promote to make a local team. So this is the last slide. So what we are facing now. So I want to talk about myself. So 15 years ago, I was in charge of promoting the seismic retrofitting, how to make homes resilient to earthquake. 10 years ago, I was in charge of mitigation measures for climate change, how to make homes energy efficient. These days, the adaptation. So how to tackle with typhoon and floods on building policies. So we started to study about waterproof housing. One of the major housing company developed the floating waterproof housing. So we are now trying to develop how to estimate these waterproof housing. So I really realized the impact of the climate change these years. So it's time for the action. Merci beaucoup.